Hello, friends and fam, and welcome to Aspyre Cast. This is episode I don't even know anymore, but I am joined with dear friend Mandy here, and today we're going to
Hey,
be
what's up?
educating all the friends about wildlife. Gosh dang it.
I don't know what I'm doing on potato.
That's okay. So, where would you like to start with this whole education process?
Well, I guess we could just jump right out of the gate and start off with, teaching people about, hunting and stuff. Because, a lot of people think about hunting and they're just like, oh, it's like you get the pew-pews and you're going around and just shooting animals just willy-nilly, like Cabela's, arcade style, which is not true. I mean, some people do that.
It's definitely a lot more than just trophy hunting, that's for sure.
For sure. I would say, 95% of people that hunt don't do trophy hunting and don't get, trophy animals. It's mostly, with the way that it works is it's mostly, you get meat to take home and you're managing the population because, unfortunately, humans have gotten rid of most predators. Because humans are like, I don't like this mountain lion eating my cows. Fuck you. So they kill the cougars off. There's none to get rid of the deer, and then the deer start dying because they eat all their freaking food. They have no self-control. Yeah. So it's a lot of it. There's also predator control too. Coyotes are a real big thing that people tend to consider nuisance animals and get rid of them. But
and
especially
literally
deer,
all of the wild hogs and things. The
especially
Boruses.
wild hogs, they're so bad. The fact that, at least in Texas, with it being a resident of Texas doesn't even need a hunting license to kill hogs now. That's how bad of a problem they are.
Oh, good. Well, I mean, there's just so many of them, but yeah.
I think what I saw in brain words, a survey sort of thing. I think they said the largest population of wild hogs is directly in Texas.
Sounds about right.
Because giant state, very expansive, population's expansive, and it's the perfect area for hogs to be like, yep, this is home now.
But there's also a whole lot of wide open range too, so they just be out there.
Yeah. Yep, they just be out there vibing and destroying literally everything.
But back to
deer, nah.
Back to the whole hunting thing. Obviously, population control is a thing, but don't go overboard.
Yeah, that's why they have hunting licenses. Because you have a set amount of an animal and the sex of the animal that you can hunt, if you can hunt them at all. And there's also other stipulations, with deer, male deer, they have to have a inside spread of their antlers at least 13 inches or bigger, so that way they're at least 2 or 3 years old, so they've had time to make more deer babies
and at least
not
mature a little bit.
Huh?
You said so that they can at least mature a little bit.
Yeah, because from what my dad told me back in the 80s, because this wasn't a rule before then, literally people were just wiping out deer because they were just like, oh, there's a deer here, I'm gonna kill it. And they almost basically went extinct in certain areas because of that. So Texas Parks and Wildlife was like, hey, chill the fuck out, let these deer grow up a little bit, and then you can kill them. So,
fair
and
enough.
Certain animals like the bighorn sheep, they're I don't know if they're endangered. I mean, they kind of are. There's a weird thing with sheep and it's hard to follow. But you get like very limited tags. Like they only give out a certain amount of tags, and it's like lottery style. So like you can apply every year, but you won't necessarily get one. And I think Maine does the same thing with moose.
The moosins, yeah.
Yeah,
it's fair enough. But okay, so what should you do, Mandy, if you come across? Well, I guess it's not a good question. A good question. What are words? Everything is failing me.
Take two.
Take two. Okay, so obviously, like, there you get like your tags and everything. What do you do with like the people that like fake a tag or find roadkill?
Well, if you find that person, you call the game warden. If you are the person, don't do that because that's illegal.
So don't just take game off the road just because you want it.
Which is kind of dumb in a way, somewhat, because especially like if you hit a deer, it's like it just was gonna have to lay on the road and go to rotting. But they had to put that rule in place because so many dudes in their giant freaking pickups were just like, I'm gonna hit this deer, and then claim that, oh, I hit the deer, and they're like, can I has please? So now the warrants are like, nah, you're just gonna leave that thing on the side of the road to rot.
Even if they've already gotten their hunt for the season or their tag for the season.
Yeah, they're just like, nope.
This is bad. No, you cannot has. Although I think if the deer meat is good enough, they'll donate it places for people and things who need the meat.
Yeah, they try to, but like a lot of times, like depending on the warden, I think it is like they won't let you take it, but like they don't like letting stuff go to waste, so they'll try to keep it and donate it like to like soup kitchens and stuff if possible. But sometimes, especially if a deer gets hit and it's not dead immediately, like it's not an instant kill, but it's like been suffering, it's all feverish before it's finally dispatched, they usually won't donate it because with the deer being stressed out, it actually makes the meat taste bad. Like it gets like super gamey and weird. I've never actually tried that, but that's what I've seen like on Lone Star Law and stuff like that, where they're just like, yeah, this deer had like a busted leg and it's like literally been sitting here because it can't run and it's just panting, it's suffering, so they just dispatch it and leave it there.
Oh, well, I guess that makes sense. Although I find it interesting that like even stressing things out like that would make them taste weird.
Yeah, it's like something to do with like the gaminess and like the stress levels or something. Like the cortisol or something in the like muscle tissue or something. I don't know. That's just what I've heard. Steph, what should you do if you find an injured wild animal into wild or near your house?
You know, if you see an animal, don't try to take care of it yourself. Even Googling things, cool, but like it's still a wild animal at the end of the day. Definitely contact your local rehabilitation centers if you can, and get that animal to them because they're gonna know what is best for that particular animal for sure.
Yeah, and side note on that, if you see a baby deer by itself but it's not running around crying and stuff, like it's laying down being real still, leave it the hell alone because it's hiding until mama comes back. It's not abandoned. It's chilling. Leave it alone. And if you're still worried, call your wildlife rehabber.
Yep. If it's been like a certain amount of like a whole long time, then yeah, I'd definitely be concerned. But keep an eye on it, but not too close to an eye. But I know
otherwise mama will come back.
For rehab type things, our and Mandy and I both actually worked at our local zoo for multiple years. So we can vouch for our rehab center. People can bring in injured birds, small mammals, things like that, and they are really good about taking care of it and making sure that either it gets dispatched if it needs to be, or they'll take care of it and release it back in the general area that it came from.
Yep, and it's their bird rehab center is friggin' great.
It's definitely like one of the best that I've seen, which transitioning brings us to Uh, a lot of the reason why zoos and aquariums actually exist are for rehabilitation purposes, and species survival programs, or SSPs, and those are like super important for the reason that a lot of animals are critically endangered and they don't need to be. And so
Yeah, for
zoos
sure.
zoos are more than just going to see animals in cages or like fish in like some aquariums, things like that. A lot of the times the animals that are in zoos are specifically there for SSPs. Like for example, at our zoo, the ocelots are part of an SSP, and so it's like a whole genetic thing that they match, and they'll like look with other zoos all over the country to find a specific matching pair to breed them, and then kind of do the same with like generations down the line so that bottlenecking doesn't happen.
Yeah, and like with animals, they don't have inbreeding problems as much as like humans do, but they still monitor that closely, just so that they can expand the hereditary features and like try to keep certain things out of the species to keep them like basically living as long as possible with few problems as possible. Um, like I know that with Fossil Rim, they have a big deal with SSP for the scimitar horned oryx, and which is still technically, I think, classified as extinct in the wild. I think it still has that classification. I don't think they've dropped it to critically endangered yet. But basically, there's so few existing in their native homeland of Chad, I think is what the country is called in Africa. But there's so few of them that it's technically considered extinct in the wild. But Fossil Rim has like, it's an expansive, basically game preserve in a way. But they have so many oryxes, and they were able to breed enough that they actually took, I think, around 20 of them to Chad and released them into the wild to like help boost the population back to something more stable. And if they didn't do that, like we wouldn't have scimitar horned oryxes anymore, except in captivity.
It's the same thing for the white rhino. They've actually gone extinct twice within the past like 6 years, because they were considered extinct in the wild, and then they got rehabilitated. They released a herd, and then more poachers came. So they are once again considered technically extinct in the wild and only in captivity right now, which definitely sucks because it's like, don't you want like, you can see like an animal now, but like generations down the line, you can be like, wow, this animal existed, but like you can't see it anymore because we did that.
Yep, that's what happened with the Tasmanian tiger. Like it went extinct in the early 1900s, and the last living one, at least known last living one, was in a zoo. But they just kind of got eradicated. It's kind of like humans eradicated the dodo because they just were like, well, I want to eat this bird, and everybody ate it until there was literally none. But like, that's one reason. Like, I'm pro zoo, but not like roadside zoo. Like, we both know that, like, at least with our zoo, it's an AZA accredited zoo. So they have that super rigorous, like, testing, and, like, they have to prove they have all, like, good welfare for the animals, and they have programs for conservation and, like, educating the public and stuff like that. Not like a Joe Exotic zoo where it's just like, come pet this baby tiger, and like it has no teeth and it's dying, and we feed it hot dogs. But
AZA is definitely like a really big thing, and they're actually like a worldwide organization that trades animals back and forth for those SSPs, kind of like we mentioned earlier, just to keep those animals, hopefully from going extinct. It's definitely like a worldwide effort, and there's many zoos connected all over the place. Like, for example, we had a Rothschild giraffe at our zoo for a while, Macy, and the Rothschild giraffe is considered technically critically endangered in the wild. So we've had baby giraffes and more baby giraffes, and they got
Baby
sent
giraffes all over the place.
they got sent elsewhere to other places so that when they get big and strong, they can carry on those genetics
Make more babies.
and make more of the like that giraffe, that species of giraffe.
Yeah. Well, like, I get, especially when we worked at the zoo, like, a lot of people are like, I hate seeing these animals behind cages, like, and, I want to see them out in the wild. But a lot of people don't realize that, like, a lot of the wild doesn't exist anymore, or it's been fenced off by, like, private landowners or something. So, like, their migration areas and stuff like that are just either blocked off or they don't exist anymore.
Habitats get smaller and smaller every year.
Yeah. Well, that and elephants are still struggling because it's really hard to contain an elephant without having like those super thick, super giant fences and like concrete posts and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But like in Africa, they can't just build like a ginormous fence across the whole country. So like they've tried doing like bee fences and stuff like that, but even so, like they keep growing more and more into where the elephants live. So like they keep going into their habitat, and the elephants are like, nah, don't like this. So they end up getting poached or just killed in general. People are like, they don't want the elephants to mess with their basically their living, even though they're the ones encroaching in it.
You got zoos, and then you also have like a whole bunch of wildlife ending up in new urbanized areas. That was where they once hunted. That is like where they were. And so with all like the urban development, they're not used to it and get pushed out of the way.
Well, and then there was that that one year that lady got killed in Abilene because of wild hogs that were like in the middle of town. Like I think it was Abilene. It may have been somewhere else. I know that they've been seen in the middle of town.
Oh yeah, for sure.
But it's like even though they're an invasive species, like even so, like people's like where people live has been expanding so much into just like the natural resources that they keep getting closer and closer, and so there ends up being more and more like wildlife encounters, and a lot of them are not good because it's either like hit by cars or like like a child gets eaten by like a coyote or like a cougar or something like that.
Well, even like that, it's like the super small species too, like the Texas horn lizard, for example. Those things are little bitty. They're little tiny fellows, and they're considered like critically endangered because they're just like so small, and most of their habitat is where we are.
Yeah, like my parents told me about them catching them when they were growing up, and like they did catch them and release them, of course, but I've never actually seen one in the wild, basically. Like they have, but I have never seen it. And they're very rare to see nowadays.
They're so critically endangered that you are literally breaking a law if you were to pick one up. Which is kind of sad.
Yeah, but it's like, they don't want someone to either like traffic it somewhere or kill it, so
that's true. And again, that's another reason like why zoos are so important. They're not just like animals on display. They are literally trying to keep species alive and going. Especially with reptiles and things.
Yeah. Well, a lot of animals, like especially in the Austin Zoo and in our zoo, a lot of their animals in their collections are not from the wild. Like they've been either from a private like owner, or they've been confiscated because of the illegal like black market wildlife trade.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, some animals aren't even able to go like be released in the wild because they don't know how to live in the wild. They've been in captivity basically since they existed.
Mm-hmm. It's kind of like I believe they said like Athena, which is like the 18-foot like python that lives in the zoo, was somebody's pet at some point. That ended up being a rescue.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised because that's why I think it's in Florida that there's a whole bunch of, I think it's reticulated pythons that have been like, they're an invasive species over there because people kept buying them as pets, but then they get too big and they
release
just dump them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Don't, like, with exotic pets and things like that, it's like so hard because people don't realize that things grow, but that's why you gotta do your research beforehand, especially with buying things like that.
That and like, especially with exotic pets, like there's a reason they're called exotic pets. It's because they're gonna usually end up being a heck of a lot harder to take care of than like a dog, a cat, or like a goldfish. Like they're gonna take very specific like habitat to live in, like a terrarium with specific humidity and heat, and like a very specific diet that's not just like kibble you go buy at Walmart.
Mm-hmm. Not to mention, if you like release a predatory animal like that in the wild, that's making things even worse for possible like prey animals that could already be endangered to like go extinct even quicker.
Isn't that kind of how they ended up getting Esmeralda, the tegu?
Mm-hmm. That's exactly how they ended up getting Esmeralda. Who is like a tegu is basically like a pretty big lizard.
A big lizard.
A very big lizard. Yeah, she's gigantic. But she ended up being a rescue, or like I guess, not really a rescue, more like I guess it is a rescue, but yeah.
Rescue / donation?
Rescue / donation, yeah. Or, no, she was like a seize. Kind of like the black bears were. Teddy and Boris were seized from a circus.
Yeah.
That's like the other thing. It's
and
like wildlife is there, sure, and they're cool to look at, sure, but wildlife is still wildlife, and they could potentially be very dangerous.
Well, and that's the thing is like a lot of people don't understand why they're called wildlife is because one, yes, they're not domesticated, but their behavior is not going to be like guessable in a way. Like they could be totally chill and then the next moment they're freaking out and they're either like clawing you or like running over you with their hooves or biting you or something. And people don't realize how like really not okay it is to have certain animals like that as pets. Like the slow loris. It's like the little lemur looking dude, and like people are like, oh, it's super cute because it's got big old eyeballs. But a lot of times, like people think it's cute when actually it's like most pictures you see of it, it's actually stressed the hell out because super bright lights. Because it's a nocturnal animal, that's why its eyes are so big. But they have the super bright light like hurts their eyes, and most of the time, especially when they're been made into a pet, their teeth have been removed so they can't bite somebody because they have really sharp teeth. So like they're just basically in pain and terrified. But people are like, oh, it's so cute. It's got big eyes and stuff like that. But it's not. Don't have a loris pet.
Or like like if you know that an animal is gonna be like a popular pet that most people don't realize is nocturnal are chinchillas. Chinchillas are nocturnal. And so they're gonna be awake and thriving in the middle of the night when you're trying to sleep. But that's just how things are. Like, be aware of like things like that if you do want to get an exotic pet or something that's a little bit out of the ordinary.
Yeah, guinea pigs are the same way. I was forced to have something like that for high school because they wouldn't let us use a dog or a cat or a fish. We had to get something special, basically, to like watch it grow and take its measurements and stuff. So I got guinea pigs. Well, Well, they are also nocturnal because all I'd hear is little scratching at night and like little pee-pee noises. They're like apparently biting each other or something. I don't know, having some sort of fight. It sucked, but I definitely don't support getting guinea pigs either, unless you like really do your research.
But basically, the whole thing that we're trying to get across here is like, zoos exist for a reason. Rehab places exist for a reason. Wildlife is wildlife for a reason, and it needs to stay wildlife. But again, like if you see something or an animal that definitely is in trouble, definitely contact your local game warden, like rehab places. They're gonna help you, or at least like tell you what to do until they can go out there to see like what or like help. Then.
Yeah. Yeah, and like with zoos, it's like definitely need to support them because most of them are non-profit. Like I don't know any of them that are for-profit except for like the really bad roadside zoos. But like they need support because that's
zoos are definitely
like they're the reason we. Sorry.
No, you're good. I keep interrupting you too.
No, it's like getting a little laggy. So. But yeah, like the whole reason we even have certain animals is because we have zoos and people that work with them to try to keep these animals alive. So.
Especially with zoos being like non-profit, it is like definitely true. You see things that are like $30-$40 in like the gift area or something that costs like super expensive. It's because like it literally takes that much money to run a zoo. Like I asked one of our zookeepers recently, like how much does it cost like per year to take care of one giraffe, and she said for all the food, medical things and stuff that they have to do, it costs somewhere around $1 million just to upkeep one giraffe. So you can only imagine like how much it really costs to take care of an entire place of animals like that do require special care, that do require certain habitats, like certain temperatures, things like that. That upkeep takes a lot.
Yeah, and not to mention, like, they have to have specialized people, the zookeepers, to, like, be able to take care of them, because most people are not going to know how to feed a giraffe without getting, stomped on, or, like, get bit by a cobra, something like that. Like, there takes specialized people, like the vets and the keepers, in order to keep them alive, because they're the only ones that have that knowledge base and experience to work with them effectively and keep them as low stress as possible, too.
That being said, I know a lot of zoos also do, like our zoo does, behind the scenes things, where you can actually go like behind the scenes and see like how things are done every day, like how meals are prepared, how habitats are cleaned, things like that. And sometimes you do actually get the opportunity to actually touch that animal, but it's also like a learning experience so that like you can see like exactly what it is that is done every day behind the scenes, and I think that's super cool. Because it's definitely not something that a whole lot of people get to see.
Yeah, and it also, like, really, like, opens people's eyes to know that, like, these animals aren't being exploited like people think they are with roadside zoos where, like, the Joe Exotic stuff. Like, no, it's like these people take this seriously, and they want these animals to thrive. They don't want them to suffer. They want them to have the best life they can so they can make babies and just live a good life. And like with our zoo, with there being a lot of deaths that happen, people are like, why are their animals always dying? But they don't realize that a lot of the animals that have died have been really geriatric and old.
A lot of the animals that were at the zoo very recently definitely have been in like the older generations.
Well, like, they only got that way because they are living where they don't have to be stressed from predators. They don't have to worry about their next meal. They're not having to like run around to go try to find their next meal. Like, they get to just basically chill out, and then if they have another animal, they get to chill out with the other animals. So they get to live longer than average life expectancy a lot of times.
Like the tiger that was at our zoo, he lived to be like almost 21 years of age. That's wild. Like, most tigers definitely don't live that long. But also on that subject, white tigers aren't a species of tigers. They were bred that way.
Nope.
So white
Yep.
tigers are
Recessive
just
genes.
tigers, guys.
Yep. They're recessive genes that were just basically someone found it and there's like, oh, we need to make more white tigers. Let's do that. So.
But that is also why zoos are important too, because you know you can get that education and be like, well, this was actually bred this way. It was bred for their genetics specifically, not just like as like a species like survival thing. This one was specifically for just their genetics. Kind of like the pug with their like little squish nose.
Ugh, yeah, I can't remember how to pronounce it. It's like brachycephalic or something like that. Animals, anything that has like the squished up nose, all of them have been bred that way. They weren't that way naturally.
Mm-hmm.
People specifically got the squished up noses and purposely bred them to keep getting like the squished up noses. Just like if you see the skull of a current pug versus like the pug before they started getting the shorter noses, like it just, hey, no ma'am, sorry, Onyx is being a butthole. If you see the skulls, like their nose is like their jaw, they have like an underbite,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like really just like a lot of times like those animals get overheated because they can't bring in enough air in their like into their lungs, and they're wheezing all the time, and people think it's cute, but a lot of times it's not healthy for that animal. Like the animal may not necessarily be in pain, but it's like not good in terms of like their welfare.
Mm-hmm. And their well-being for sure. So definitely recommend, you know, like if you've got a zoo in your area, or even not necessarily in your area, but like within driving distance, spend a day and actually like go, and if you get a chance to see like a keeper, ask them as many questions as possible, because I can guarantee you they're gonna be so happy, one, to talk to somebody, and two, to show off the animals that they love and adore, because I know, especially with the keepers here, they'd like go home and like to their actual pet, but then come to work and have more of those animals that they care about and love, and they just want everybody to know that, and that they're taking care
like,
of them.
Yeah, and they're like super proud to be like able to care for these animals and see them thrive, because yes, they're in captivity, but they're thriving, they're having a good time, they're making babies, and they're keeping that species alive, and they're giving the general public the ability to see these animals up close and in person, and also learn more about them, so that like it's not just a computer screen, but they can see this real animal and they can learn about it and learn how to like certain ways they can help out, like by donating, or you know, buying that super expensive soda at the concession stand or something like that.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of zoos now even have like those little like voting tables where like they'll give you a token when you buy your entrance ticket, and you like go and vote for your favorite one, but each one of those animals still is gonna get some sort of attention from that zoo by the end of like their voting period.
Yeah, and it really helps out with organizations in the field too, in order to help those animals, like the whooping cranes and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. So not only do the zoos like help, like a lot of the money goes like obviously to the zoo themselves, but they do also like will help local rehabbers as well that can take care of animals that maybe the zoo particularly can't. Like I know, for example, like our zoo takes in birds, and small mammals, but anything more than that, they'll like either give to a game warden or to like specialists somewhere else. And so either way, that's going to something that definitely matters, and is something that should definitely be not taken like super lightly.
Yeah, and like if we didn't have rehabbers, we would lose a lot of wildlife,
Mm-hmm.
because especially with birds, like they hit windows or something like that, or like they get a broken wing or something like that, they'll just die, or get eaten, because a lot of times, um, you know, if you're weak or sick, you become lunch for something else. So.
Yep. So definitely keep that in mind next time that you guys take a family trip or just a road trip in general to a zoo. Um, there's a lot of people there that work really, really hard on those animals. And even if you don't see them necessarily, there's tons and tons of staff that work behind the scenes to keep those animals as happy as possible, and definitely as healthy as possible, 24/7. Even on the days where like inclement weather happens, there's always going to be somebody up there to make sure that those animals are healthy, and things are going smoothly.
Yeah, and like, if you're ever worried about the zoo that you want to go to, it's super easy to do some research on it. Like, the AZA has their own website specifically to show they're accredited zoos, but also, like, generally, like, bad zoos are going to be the ones that exploit the animals for money, so that, like, they don't have as good of living conditions, or they're letting people get too close to certain wild animals like the baby tigers or stuff like that. And they don't have, like, or the animals, like, look rough, they don't look healthy or something like that. And a lot of times, especially, like, I think the Dallas Zoo, like, it kind of sucks because you're kind of separated a lot from these animals. Like, they're really distant with, like, the separation from in the exhibits, like the big trenches and stuff they have in them. But they do that not only as a safety barrier for you and the animal, but they also do it to let the animal feel more safe, because it is a wild animal. They don't necessarily, they're not necessarily tame, and they don't necessarily like people. So, like, having that distance keeps them from being as stressed, so they can be more natural.
That's for sure. Like I said, definitely visit those places, and ask all the questions. Wildlife is really freaking cool, you guys. Whether it be like, no matter like the biome, like oceanic life matters. Like Sahara life matters. All of that stuff matters. And if one thing goes wrong, an entire ecosystem could go out of balance. And so we got to make sure that those animals definitely stay in existence for that reason, to keep things balanced. Otherwise,
otherwise we have nothing. Like, we won't get food on the table, and we won't have stuff to look at that we enjoy, and, like, noises to listen to, like bird song, and, like, you're just in nature. Like, there just won't be any of that if we don't try to be proactive in making sure wildlife stays wild.
Yes, very true. Well, do you have anything else that you would like to talk about on that subject?
Jeopardy music playing in my head. I want to say yes, but I'm not able to think of anything, surprisingly. Well, I guess I could kind of circle back around to the hunting thing, because it kind of goes in the same constituents as zoos. But a lot of people don't agree with a lot of hunting preserves and, like, ranches, the high fence ranches, because it's like a canned hunt or something like that, which some of them are, but especially here in Texas, those places are so expansive that, like, they have to use ATVs or helicopters to get around them, because they're so enormous that you can't necessarily walk through it. So, like, even though they've imported these animals that aren't natural wildlife into these areas, like scimitar horned oryx is another one, they're actually thriving in our environment, because Texas is so, like, apparently just really good in biome for a lot of animals. But like the oryx, the addax is another antelope that's in danger that also thrives really well. But even though like these hunts are like super expensive, they still like most of the time go back to helping that animal thrive. Like they keep genetics going on it, kind of like with the SSP thing.
Mm-hmm.
They try to keep them, from getting bottleneck and all that sort of thing. And yes, it is kind of a trophy thing where people get to gloat or whatever, but it's still Onyx, quit. I am in the middle of a call, my dude. Hush. Quit trying to break into things. Jesus Christ. Anyways, it is kind of a trophy thing, but a lot of it goes back to actually helping those animals.
Mm-hmm.
And they have specific programs and stuff. Like I think the Ox Ranch has one where you can feed the giraffes like you feed them at the zoo, and you get that up close experience. But it's like, even though it is kind of a negative constituent because it gives people the opportunity to kill an animal, but most of them are already not in their natural environment. But they get to live in a place that's expansive, kind of like it, and it still is kind of wild. But they get to live longer because they don't have to necessarily worry about food, and predation is not as bad. So they still get to help the animal in a way, compared with kind of like zoos, just in a different way that it's still hunting.
Mm-hmm.
But
that being said, like if you wanted to be become like a rehabber or someone that does have these ranches, there's a whole lot of stuff that you have to go through to even be qualified for it before they'd even give you a permit to keep these animals. And it does require a permit to keep these animals.
Oh yeah, for sure.
You can't just have them, unfortunately. And there's something that gets checked on almost as often as AZA zoos do, just to make sure that things are still in regulation and things like that. But if wildlife is something that's important to you, definitely do your research and see what's up, especially for local areas.
Yeah, for sure. And if you're not able to physically help out, monetary donations are always super helpful. Because there's a lady that I follow her on Instagram, but she's in New York and she rehabs white-tailed deer most of the time. She also does other animals, but her main thing is white-tailed deer. And she has about 30 fawns right now that she is raising, that have either had their mothers killed by a car accident or they got attacked by a coyote or something. And she's rehabbing them to re-release them in the wintertime. But, she's not releasing them into a penned area. They're released into an area where they can get hunted, and some of them have. But they're getting to be re-released into the wild to try to live a second chance at life.
Mm-hmm.
And she's always needing donations because, a lot, you can do a one-time donation, but the reoccurring ones, the ones most important, because, animals gotta eat. So
for sure,
they do a lot of eating.
And even if you can't do something monetarily, definitely the number one thing that's super important here is just education. So if you got somebody that has a question or something like that, it's super easy to just hop online and find information about stuff. But like I said, going to your source, your local zoo or rehab place, is definitely going to be your number one place for information.
Yeah, and it's super important to try to make sure to learn about this stuff because it is the environment. We have to share this earth with animals, whether we like it or not. It's, unless you're gonna go live in the space station, there's gonna be animals. There's gonna be wild animals in some way. Even in cities, there's coyotes. Coyotes are super adaptable, so a lot of them are found now in cities because they find an easy meal in the city compared to running around and catching mice or whatever in the wild. But it's best to educate yourself, number one, for sure, because not only does it help the animal, but it helps you. Like, it helps you know how to react to this animal if you need to call for help for yourself or for the animal, and how to, like, make sure we have, like, a symbiotic relationship with the wildlife if they're not, like, an invasive species.
Mm-hmm. For sure. But I think that's pretty much all that we can cover for the most part on the subject. So
I could talk for hours on it, so
same, but we can't really do that. But for now, friends and fam, thank you for taking the time to listen and learn about some wildlife today. It's definitely both near and dear to both Mandy and my own heart. So thank you if you've taken the time to listen, and I hope to hear about your zoo adventures soon.
Yeah, definitely check out the zoos because they're important.
All right, bye guys.
Manages to find it 5-4 here. Aspyre gets the round, stops momentum, and they're at match point.
This is his time to shine, but the fuse is underway. He lands the audio cube, and he pops out just in time. Beautiful. Side looking to find it, and does. Aspyre picks up round number 3. And another one there in favor of Aspyre. They're starting to run this one back. Ending 1, maybe make it 2. And no, it's going to be a massacre. Everyone pistols in hand. Aspyre takes it to map 3.